All right, today we're going to jump right into a Hindi news report that covered a pretty intense moment of political paralysis over in the United States, a really historic government shutdown. In this explainer, we're going to break down how that report saw the crisis, the political firefight at the center of it all, and of course, the real-world impact it had on the country. Okay, let's get into it. So get this. On the day this report came out, the U.S. government had already been in a partial shutdown for 39 days. 39! That's more than a month, with huge parts of the federal government just stopped. And we're not just talking about a long time. This was literally a record breaker. The report makes a huge deal of the fact that this was, at that point, the longest government shutdown in the entire history of the United States. So this wasn't just another political squabble, it was something totally different. So here's how we're going to break this down, based on the source. We'll look at the state of the nation. Then, the nasty blame game that was going on, the real impact on people, the bigger political goals hiding underneath, and finally, what made this gridlock so historic. Okay, first up, let's just set the scene. The news report really paints a dark picture of the country at the time. It uses these really strong words like havoc, chaos, and even devastation to describe the feeling across America during this whole thing. And you know what made it all feel so much worse? There was just no end in sight. The source is crystal clear on this. Every single attempt by the administration to figure things out and get the government running again had completely failed. It was a total stalemate. Which, of course, brings us right to the political heart of the crisis. With the government closed for business, the report describes this full-blown war of words erupting, with each side just pointing fingers and blaming the other. So the big question is, right, who's to blame? This slide lays out the two completely different stories we see in the source material. On one hand, the news report itself points the fingers straight at the White House, calling it Trump's whim. But on the other hand, you have President Trump firing right back, saying it was all the fault of his opponents, the Democratic Party. So let's dig into the report's perspective first. It basically says the reason this shutdown is dragging on is because of the president's whim, or you could say his stubbornness. That's the main charge from the news source, suggesting it was all about personal will, not political necessity. And then you have President Trump's side of the story, also from the report. And wow, the language he used was pretty intense. He's quoted accusing the Democrats of pouncing on the shutdown like dogs. That quote alone just shows you how bitter and personal this political fight had become. Okay, so while all that political fighting was going on, the report makes it really clear that regular people were feeling the heat. This wasn't some abstract debate happening in Washington. It had real, everyday consequences for Americans. The source points to a bunch of things, right? It says millions of lives were directly affected, you had cuts to government programs, reports of flight delays, and obviously all the government work that wasn't considered essential just ground to a halt. You can see how the disruption was just spreading everywhere. Okay, but this is where it gets really interesting, because according to President Trump's own words in the report, the shutdown wasn't just about the shutdown. There was a much bigger political game being played. And to get what he was aiming for, you've got to understand this one political term, the filibuster. Basically, it's a tactic in the U.S. Senate that lets the minority party block stuff from getting passed. And according to the report, President Trump saw this whole shutdown crisis as a chance to go after the filibuster itself. And this is the real kicker. The report quotes Trump in a way that shows the shutdown wasn't just a fight he was having, it was a tool he was using. He was trying to use the crisis to force through other Republican policies that had been stuck for a long, long time. And his quote pretty much lays out a whole strategy. You can see it right here. Step 1, he said Republicans needed to destroy the filibuster. Step 2, doing that would let them pass all these policies they'd always wanted, and he even gave an example. Step 3, things like voter ID cards. So suddenly, the shutdown becomes this key to unlocking a much bigger agenda. So at the end of the day, where does that leave us? Well, with a country caught in this historic, really unprecedented political jam. It wasn't just a shutdown anymore. It was a record-breaking deadlock. And you know, the report doesn't end with a solution. It just stops. Right in the middle of the mess. The government is still shut, the blame game is still raging, and there's no clear way out. The whole country was just left hanging. Which really leaves us with this final thought, doesn't it? The report talks about breaking a record for a shutdown, but it makes you wonder, when politics gets this gridlocked, What are the costs that go beyond just closed offices and delayed flights? What else gets broken in the process?